Looking for all the latest tips, tricks, updates of what's going on in the recruiting industry, check out the Digital Recruiter Sunday night newsletter. I am not here to blow up your inbox. I don't have enough time to create an email every single day. I once a week send you impactful, a big thing that I've learned this week or realized from working with hundreds of recruiters, owning an agency myself. I'm in the trenches every day like you are, and I'm sharing everything that I'm seeing every Sunday, from content, from automation, from how to get better clients, how to find candidates quicker, how to grow your team, how to hire people, everything in between. The link is in the comments. Sign up today, or you can go to my LinkedIn profile, Clark Wilcox. It's the first link on my featured section. You can sign up there. It's all free. So you get all the tips, everything that you need, free in your inbox every Sunday night. Sign up today. All right, welcome back to another episode, Digital Recruiter Podcast. Today I'm joined by Julia Arpag, CEO of Aligned Recruitment. She is a mom of 4 kids, based in Atlanta, has an awesome story, great energy. We connected via LinkedIn, and I'm super excited for her to share her story because she uses a lot of the digital recruiter kind of systems principles already, and she's been super successful in the first year plus as an entrepreneur, and is an open book, which I always appreciate. So, Julia, thanks for being here.
Thank you, Clark. Thank you for having me. I'm so excited.
Of course. Well, you want to I gave a little bit of an intro, but how about we just go into, maybe let's go into how you got into recruiting.
Sure. Let's do it. Let's go
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
So, like a lot of extroverted people, I was like, well, what can you do where you just talk all day but make money? And the answer is sales or recruitment. So I picked recruitment. So I started actually in college admissions. I used to recruit 17-year-olds to attend a school up in upstate New York where I'm from. I actually loved that job. It was such a blast. I worked there for about 3 years. And then my husband and I relocated down to Atlanta for his job and got into corporate recruitment and never looked back.
I love it. And then when did you go to agency?
Immediately. I spent 1 year in-house. It was terrible. So I immediately pivoted. Yeah, I immediately pivoted to agency. So I worked as an agency recruiter for about 5 years before I started Aligned Recruitment.
And what did you not like about being internal? Because usually I see people want to go from agency and running to corporate because they think it's easier, but you went the opposite way. Why was that?
Oh, no, Clark, hear me say, it is so much easier. Like no one is going to disagree with you about that. It is so much easier.
But you don't like the easy road.
Yeah. It's boring. I was so bored. And there are so many internal politics. Like I was just like, guys, can we just hire and be done with it? Like it's just, and hear me say, every organization is so different. So I happen to work in a very toxic environment. So I had a horrible internal recruitment experience. I'm sure if I'd been at one of these, so I recruit in tech. If I'd been at one of these amazing, super modern tech companies, I would have had a totally different experience.
Maybe. Yeah. Maybe. You know, I don't know. Our LinkedIn feed the last couple of years might argue differently, right? With the
now, I will say you have way better job security if you work in agency, because if you work internal, it just takes one layoff and then you're gone. Versus if you work agency, you have multiple clients and there's a little bit more of a landing pad. Now, I think the most stability is owning your own agency, which is why we're here today. But
yeah, exactly. Like it's the most stability. Although if people have noted this week, it's you can call it a little gray, or I skipped gray, just went to white in the beard. So you'll get a little bit of that, but it could definitely be worth it and well worth it. Well, and so you were an agency for 5 years. Now, did they have you go right to full debt, and you were doing tech recruitment then as well, right? Or
for the first 3 years, I did sales recruitment, actually. So I was hiring, still within the tech industry. Like our client was a B2B SaaS company, but I was specifically hiring for their sales team. which is a total blast. I loved that. But then I got poached by my most recent employer who does do exclusively tech recruitment. So they reached out to me, gave me an amazing offer. So I took that opportunity. So for the 2 years right before I started Aligned, I was doing mostly tech recruitment. Some of our clients had needs on other teams like sales, product, stuff like that. But a lot of engineers, a lot of engineering leadership, stuff like that.
Gotcha. And so kind of been across the departments, it seems
Yeah.
like was it still kind of mostly in the SaaS world? Is that kind of still where you operate, or is it a little bit spread, or
Yes.
like what's the focus now?
Yeah, mostly SaaS. So I go to market with B2B SaaS companies. Those are the
Yeah.
types of companies that I'm trying to close. I will say, I know people have mixed feelings on this. I do say yes to recs that are outside of my ICP if I know that I can recruit on them.
Yeah.
So one of my longest standing clients, they've been here since the beginning of Aligned. They are in the real estate investment space, but I know them. They were a client of mine before. I knew I could deliver. I've hired lots of great people for them. So they're still a client of mine, even though they're outside of tech.
Well, you bring up an interesting point there, because this is the feedback I've given people is, you know, you have to have some sort of niche for cold marketing and cold outreach, because otherwise people don't know, they don't know you from Adam or Eve, and there's hundreds of thousands of recruiters on LinkedIn and in our email inbox, and it gets crazy. But people are like, well, I can do this, I can do that. I'm like, that's great, but like, let your referrals or let your current clients ask you about that. Like, that's where, because then you have the relationship already, the ease, there's a lot less friction. There's probably more patience and goodwill. There's more trust if they're asking you to go outside the scope versus going outside the scope with a brand new relationship. I mean, that is the uphill battle of all uphill battles.
It's true.
And I know you have different systems and automation and some content. So like, you're leveraging the digital piece effectively to probably cast a little bit of wider net, right? So, because I know that when we go outside the scope, we can set up a Dripify campaign. We can test it out. It's not much of a time commitment to see if we can get a response within the first few days. And if we do, we get a few screens, a couple submittals, and like, great. Like, now we potentially have people in play for like a 20K placement or something like that. Right. So is that kind of like how you look at it and operate it too, or is it a little different?
I actually exclusively go to market for software engineering roles. Like, I don't even, so I post on LinkedIn, you're right. And so on LinkedIn, I post about whatever recs I'm working on. So if it's a COO, I post about that. I don't pretend like I only recruit software engineers, but when I'm doing cold outreach, like either over email or over LinkedIn, I'm only reaching out to people that have software engineering openings. But then to your point, I do get a lot of referrals. And so those are typically outside of my ICP. And I do take those calls.
Gotcha. And in terms of, because what was the number? You went to 700K in just you and a partner in the first year, or what was
so our official launch date of the business was August 31st, 2023. But I actually didn't go back to work full time until November because I had just had a baby. So we haven't even been in business full time for a year yet. And we're at 700K in revenue.
Yeah. And 1-year-old, 3-year-old, it was 14 to 15.
Yeah, those are my 4 boys. Yep.
Yeah. So 4 boys, married, moved down a couple years ago, deal with the layoff, and to have that, like, what do you attribute kind of that growth, right? Because that's not, people will be pretty happy with that, right? You and a partner that in year one with all that going on, like, what allowed you to kind of get all that somewhat organized, right? Organize the chaos and drive the results. Because that's something I hear all the time is people, they worry about their website, or they do this to kind of do everything, but actually worry about driving revenue. And we all can make excuses, and you have every reason to make excuses. And you had every reason, but you didn't. Like, what made that happen? Like, what do you attribute that to?
I just had a single-minded focus. I knew that nothing would move the needle like my actual go-to-market revenue-generating strategy. Yeah. So that is the thing I poured all of my time and energy into. We slapped together a website. Like, it looked fine. Like, it was a very fine website. Yeah. At least it existed, but that was it. Like, I spent so little time. My ATS, quote unquote, was an Excel sheet for the first several months. My CRM was an Excel sheet for the first several months. Like, I'm now implementing more like legit processes, but for a very long time, it was just me like gunslinging out there, just closing recs. That's all I was focusing on.
I love it. I mean, that is the ultimate digital recruiter approach. And that is, it's just such a testament. And for anyone listening, because sometimes our listeners or people I talk to, like, oh, what if I'm worried about putting myself out there, or I got to pick the right website company, the right ATS. I'm like, you don't need
No, you
any of
don't.
that. You need Google Sheets, you need a functioning internet and phone, and that's it. And leverage LinkedIn because it's free. Why not? If you can pay tools, you can Sales Nav, Dripify, $198 a month. Like, you can't beat it. Google Sheets are just paying for the domain or the email or whatever, and like that's it. Like, you're off and running. And I've helped people build six figures with just that. And I mean, you kind of sounds like did the same thing, and like that's just like that's the move. But I know you were also like posting pretty quickly. As well. Like, was that part of like kind of the strategy, or what inspired you to just start putting yourself out there?
Yeah. So I was an English major. That's like a
Yeah.
fun fact about what I did in college. So
Yeah.
the joke was always like, I can read and write really well, but there's
Yeah.
like, who's going to hire me to read? Right. So that's not a thing. So the good news is no matter what job you have to be a good writer. And especially in our industry, you have to be a good communicator. Like, that is literally going to make or break you. So I was actually excited now that I was running my own agency to not be beholden to an employer. Like, I know they can sometimes be kind of weird about what you do or don't post on LinkedIn. So I was like, oh my God, I'm really going to lean into this skill set, and I'm going to learn how to do this effectively. So there's this guy, Toby Oyewole. He's pretty well known on LinkedIn. He has a B2C brand. So he's not B2B, but he works with job seekers. And I had just noticed his content, was very impressed by him. And then he actually put out a course that was super cheap. So like, I didn't even charge it to the business. I just like put it on my personal credit card and bought his course and just I just did it. Like, I just spent a couple days, like went really deep, understood all of his strategies and all of his content kind of protocols. And then ever since then, I've just committed to posting every single day for the last 14 months.
That's amazing. And you just post, like, do you look at likes, do comments, impressions, or are you just kind of posting the post? Like, what's your kind of approach there?
Yeah. So my North Star is that I'm getting in front of the right people. Yep. So since we're B2B, my opinion is that our North Star is not impressions. It's not likes. It's not comments. It's your audience. So what I do, actually, I use this as a biz dev tactic. I go and look at who liked my post, and I look at who viewed my profile, and anyone in there who's an ICP, I reach out to them directly. So for me, it's a lead gen tool. I don't care if I got 20 likes or 2,000. Actually, if I got 2,000, that's kind of stressful because it's a lot of people to go through. So when I do have those viral posts, obviously I'm grateful. But no, my focus is very much on providing value for hiring managers.
I mean, you've been. I don't know if you're doing it on purpose, but you've been stealing my mission statement, everything I teach people the first 10 minutes of this conversation. You're not stealing it all. But I love it because, again, just for the record, we haven't, like, Julia and I wasn't her coach or anything else like that. I don't, obviously, I know you worked with Diane, and I know her, and Diane is awesome. But like, you came up with this, like, it's out there. And I think for when you have this mindset where I'm doing it, I want people to just hear this and just do it. That it's LinkedIn organic content, posting it. Who's in your audience? Don't worry about likes. This is not high school, or probably more accurately middle school. Like, are you getting in front of your ICP? And it sounds, and I know we'll talk about the automation piece as well. Like, get in front of them first. Worry about that. Who viewed your profile, right? That's why I love Sales Nav, because you can have the who viewed your profile since this post, I think, on premium, but Sales Navigator has the tab right there. And it's like one of the best filters, even if you don't use automation, just for that alone. Because then, to your point, that is that kind of your warm outbound, right? You can kind of see who's paying attention in your signals. But then I know you also, like, mentioned you use some like automation as well. Like, I'm assuming you're curating your audience to your content and all that. So you're giving yourself a better chance to build that ecosystem, but also have them also kind of see your content.
Yes. So I view content as a kind of warming function. Like, I don't expect someone to DM me and be like, oh my gosh, I loved your post today. Can you please hire these 4 software engineers for my company? I don't expect that. Like, I don't know if you've seen the stat that only 3% of your target audience is ever actively buying, but I'm still wanting to get my name out there to the other 97% so that when they are ready to buy, I'm top of mind. So honestly, the outbound motion is how I've closed all the deals I've closed. But then the content is how I just kind of, honestly, I think that's why I've been so successful in my outbound, because they trust me. They've seen me show up every day and talk about the success our agency has had.
Do you hear that on calls? Like, are they saying that to you? It's
Yes.
like the posts and calls, like what are typically things that you hear on those calls?
They're just super impressed. Yeah. They're just like, wow, like it's so cool to watch you build your agency in public. Like, I'm really grateful that you kind of peel back the curtain and let us see how you recruit, you know, what your process is, the success that you've had. Yeah, I get that a lot on sales calls.
I love that. And how do you, like, do you have, because one of the things I've debated and I struggle with is pictures of my son, right, or family, or like how deep do I go into personal and stuff like that. I don't talk about, you know, my faith, and I'll talk about God, and I have it on my about section, and I'll sprinkle from time to time, and I'm not ashamed of it. I don't know if it's always relevant in terms of LinkedIn and business. You know, sometimes I blocked out his face on pictures because now he's a year old and all that stuff, and it's like more like kind of defined. Like, how do you draw like kind of your own boundaries on like you post personal or not personal, or kind of what that level is? Because that's something I get asked all the time, and it's kind of everyone's own discretion, honestly.
Totally.
But, like, what are your thoughts on that?
Totally. So I used to post pictures of my kids, and I stopped, and I actually went back and deleted all the photos I've ever posted of my kids, with the exception of my 2 teenagers, because in my opinion, they're old enough to get to make that decision. So they're in foster care. So I do have to put hearts over their faces, like legally. But they've said, no, like, we want to be famous. Like, please post us on LinkedIn. So they have like given me permission, but my two biological sons are only 1 and 3. So they can't give me that permission. So I actually, felt uncomfortable with the fact that I was putting them out there without their consent. Yeah. And maybe when they're older, they'll be like, oh my God, Mom, I can't believe you didn't post us for the past 15 years. And I guess I'll deal with that when it comes. But for now, I've landed on, I don't post my kids. I do post very, very actively about my faith. So I'm a Christian, and that's a huge reason for basically every single thing I do. So for me, it does feel very relevant to talk about the favor of God over our business. I mean, God's the reason I'm a foster parent. God's the reason that my marriage is strong enough to sustain the craziness of being an agency owner. Like, it's relevant in everything I say and do. Yeah. And I also want to give God like props, like, right? Like, I didn't do this by myself. Like, he totally opened doors for me that I couldn't have opened myself. So that's kind of where I've landed on that.
Absolutely. In that sense, I agree. It is always relevant, and he is always relevant. I think in terms of the way I'm thinking about it, relevant more as how do I say, pushy is like the right word, but I'm always very sensitive to, you know, it's very much kind of my own, right? And it's like, this has impacted me in my life and all that. And I think maybe because I'm newer in the last 5 years, wanted to be appreciative and respectful, like, of kind of the gift that I felt like I was given, but also not coming across as kind of learning of like be pushy on other people, right? I think staying on its merits. That's always something that I remember I grew up with and I'm thinking about. So I just want to clarify that, because you're right. You are right. It is relevant in every piece of it. You know, I think, but sometimes to each person's journey too is like your comfort level can grow in certain topics, talk about family or faith or anything else, and like it's okay to not focus on that in the beginning. For the listeners out there, to focus on business and all that, and kind of warm up into some of the personal stuff, and kind of get into those posts a little bit as well. You know, it can help. It humanizes, right, us to the audience a little bit. It kind of helps us stand out for more than just like every other quote unquote recruiter out there, you know, posting about National Hug Day or whatever else is going on, you know, so nonsense. So.
Yeah, I personally, to your point, it's totally up to everyone's individual comfort level. Yeah. I like posting personal stuff because I'm very passionate about work-life integration. Yes. Like, I really, I don't, maybe someone has work-life balance. I'd be curious to have them talk about that, because I feel like when you do what we do, when you work remotely, when you work for yourself, one of the gifts is you have total flexibility. Like my 1-year-old has a doctor's appointment on Monday morning. I'm taking him to that. I don't have to have the nanny do that because I get to do whatever I want because I'm the boss. So I'm very grateful for that flexibility. But what that means is sometimes after the kids have gone to bed at 7:30 at night, I log back on and, do some more BD outreach or do some more sourcing or write my LinkedIn post for the next week or whatever the case may be. So all that being said, the reason I post personal stuff is because my life is just all kind of intertwined.
Yeah, well, I think you do. I mean, you're a great example of, I think it's the right balance, because I always read your stuff. I'm like, oh, that's like, it's insightful, it's interesting, and I think it's just real, right? I think there's a lot to learn from just like how authentic you are with the content, because I think people are trying to learn how to be that, and I think sometimes you kind of find it in yourself first. I think if I were to post stuff that was authentic 6-7 years ago, I was a little bit of a mess. It wouldn't have resonated all that great. I had to figure some things out first, and I'm still very, very flawed and far from perfect, but it's almost like there was like too much going on. It wasn't like, it wouldn't have been good for me to post a bunch of stuff. So I do think it's one of the things I've learned is almost like not having my own, not battling sometimes some of the battles on LinkedIn. If you like people that complain or want to air their grievances and all that stuff, like, and you don't do this, and it's just like, well, that's one of the things I noticed. One of the things I had to get to was like just making sure like I wasn't using LinkedIn as my therapist.
Yes, that's such a good way to put it. Yeah, the people that like get on there and they just like complain. I'm like, who? Why? Like, what are your goals? Like, who are you? Why? Like, I just don't understand what you think is going to happen. I think that's crazy. Yeah.
Totally what are your clients going to think? Or your prospects are like, oh, like I'm not sure. Like, I don't know how I feel. If I want to, work with that person. I think that's always like an interesting line with posting and content. But to your point, like, just the benefits you can have from it, how much easier it can make. And people are like, oh, I don't post anywhere else and all that. I'm like, well, use it for your business, right? You use it to support your family or give yourself that flexibility. And I think work-life balance is a myth. Harmony is a good word that I've heard, I've heard often. And an old client used that with me yesterday of like work-life harmony. I think it's kind of what we're looking for because it's kind of the ebbs and flows.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, let's talk about the other big piece, is the automation piece. So I know you mentioned the word that is not to be mentioned on LinkedIn, right? It's like Voldemort, Dripify. How did you come across like automation? How did you start leveraging it? And how do you leverage it?
Yeah. So like you mentioned, when I first started the business, I was in Diane Prince's coaching cohort, and one of the other recruiters in there, I honestly can't remember who, which is hilarious, but one of them mentioned that he was using Dripify. And this was back in my days of like bootstrapping, like I wasn't paying for anything. Yeah. So when I saw how much Dripify costs, it's what, like $100, not even a month. I forget. It's super cheap. I was like, oh my God, that's so expensive. Like I like couldn't imagine paying for it. So I signed up for the 1-week free trial and wrote a couple campaigns and got like a 50% message acceptance rate. And then like a 25% response rate, which is super, like that's absurd. Like that's way higher than email or like any other tool you could possibly use. So I was like, if I close literally one deal, this will pay for itself 15 times over. Yes. So let me just do it. And Dripify is to this day my single favorite tool in my tech stack. So,
you'll be both.
Yeah, right. So what I love about it, I do have some campaigns, like some text campaigns that I run through Dripify, but mostly I use it for connection only campaigns. And then when they accept, I go and I leave either like a LinkedIn selfie or a LinkedIn voice note where I'm like, hey, I'm like an actual human reaching out to you, an actual human. I'm not just like throwing you into this list of 1 million people I'm reaching out to.
I mean, again, you're giving away all the strategy.
I'm giving away all your secrets.
Strategy. No, it's not, right? Because it isn't how you execute it. You still have to kind of have the knack for the messaging, the follow up, and handle the sales. There's so many complexities, and that way you make it look simple, but it's anything but to kind of get there and internalize all this stuff and piece it all together. And I always tell people like the more experience you have, and you've done recruiting almost the hard way before, right before the digital stuff, like dripify and content, it's like easier almost to pick up on, right? Or someone like you can see the opportunity, kind of see through the weeds, versus someone that's brand new. You're like, okay, I'm learning this, I'm learning that, but I'm also learning how to source, and I'm learning how to qualify a sales call and a rec and all that. So it's like, I think you were kind of in the perfect position, and you had the necessity of having your own business, and nothing will drive you to figure out stuff quicker than, starting your own business, right? 4 kids, all that stuff. Like, what am I doing here? I mean, it almost sounds like I'm kind of going a couple different directions here, but I think this would be interesting to hear your take on this. Like, what's the level of growth been like in the first year of entrepreneurship compared to the few years before being in recruiting, but not kind of having to make it on your own? Like, has that been noticeable on your end?
My gosh, Clark. I don't have words. Okay. So this past year feels like it's lasted for like 10 years. Like the amount of,
amen.
Like the amount that my life has just changed, and the amount that my like day-to-day work has changed, and my mindset and everything about the way I function is totally different. So the big change for me is I've actually never worked a 360 desk. I've never sold a day of my life before I started Aligned Recruitment. I have only ever done delivery. I've only been in a recruiter seat. So that's why I hired a coach immediately, because I was like, I have no idea how to do this. Like literally none. I had several former clients that quickly came over. So those were my first big wins. Like I didn't have to sell, but I did have to get on those sales calls and pitch why they should go with me, this random little agency that just started, instead of like these big recruitment agencies where they were my clients before. Yeah. So every aspect of sales was totally new for me. So I've had to level up in every single way.
And so I love that you got some of the clients, you built it up. Like, how did those sales conversations go in the beginning? Like, what was some of the hurdles you had to overcome? What are the things that you were easier than you thought they would be? Things that were harder than you thought in sales? Like, what was that like?
Man, it was invigorating. The first couple of sales calls, I was like, this is happening. Like, I'm actually getting people to like want to be on a sales call with me. This is crazy. So I don't know if you've seen the Amy Cuddy TED Talk where she talks about how important your body language is, but she talks about if you stand with your hands on your hips in the superwoman pose in the mirror for 2 minutes, your confidence skyrockets. So I did that before every single sales call for the first like 4 months. Every single one. I would go stand in my bathroom. I would stand in the mirror. I would do the 2-minute Wonder Woman pose. And I would just go into the calls feeling super confident. And a big belief I've just really maintained this first year is the clients that are meant to close will close. Yeah. So I go into that call knowing if we're meant to work together, we're going to work together. And if we're not, then we won't. And both of those outcomes are a gift.
Everyone needs that mindset. It's so... And this is what I coach people on, because I've seen it. I've seen it from afar with someone like you, seen the clients that I've worked with that have scaled quickly or to create a revenue, quickly with their own business. It's the long game. And people get confused when I talk about the long game. Like, does that mean I shouldn't expect things right away? And I'm like, no. Like the mindset of the long game and being open and giving people an out, right? Not trying to force them into a corner like a cat to like, you have to work with me and all that. And, don't get off this call until you sign the deal and I swipe your credit card or, whatever, all that works. It's like, that's how you get the short-term results. Like, because you're filtering quickly. Like, your goal in sales is to filter and get the yes or get the no as quickly as possible, or at least get the no as quickly as possible. That's true with the candidate sourcing, right? And the candidate screening. The difference is that's a free service to them. It's a little different when there's real money on the line, right? On the company side, but like giving people that out and just being okay and like setting the right expectations for yourself in sales, and like just like keep going. Just because you might get a no or a no right now, it doesn't mean that your campaign stops or that your content stops. And like you just have to keep going. And it's interesting because that those actions cultivate the mindset, or they at least reinforce the initial mindset that you want to have. That's what reinforces it, and then you just kind of keep going. Right. And again, I don't know, some people start with a runway, some people don't. I always tell people, start with a runway if you can, right? Especially if you're new to sales, like give yourself some breathing room. Do you have people that you can bring on as clients and all that? But if you're starting from scratch, like you want to consider that, right? Because you don't want to be stuck trying to feed your family and you're learning sales. Like that's a pretty tough place to be. But
yeah, and that's something I said. A lot of recruiters have reached out and asked me how I made the decision to open the agency, because I did get several job offers after I got laid off before I decided to start Aligned. And what made me decide to start Aligned and not take those job offers is that my family, we had financial freedom to make that choice, to give it at least a year. I was like, let me just give myself a year, see how it goes. If it doesn't work, okay, I'll pack it up and I'll go get a job. But yes, I totally agree. If you can take that pressure off, like, I have to close this deal right now or else my family won't eat dinner today. Like, I get that that's a horrifying feeling. And I don't want you to have to build a business with that pressure. It's not good for you and it's not good for your prospective clients. So yeah, any kind of budget you can design, even if it means you're eating rice and beans for dinner, if you can cut back so that you can give yourself that runway, I agree. That's just going to make your experience so much better.
Absolutely. And I've had people do the side hustles, right? We've talked about Dripify. We've talked about content. Now, some places I've seen people be able to work places where they can post on content and build their agency on the side. Some people can, some people can't, but you can automate some of that stuff and do some stuff on the side and try to build that up. You could potentially look at split partnerships with other recruiters, right? And like just tapping into your network and getting creative. I think if you have the will, there is a way to make it happen and craft your situation. But I think just being realistic and kind of just being honest about the cards that you have. And I think that is such a important part of tackling this, because I've seen people go in a little bit guns a-blazing, especially without the sales background, and maybe that come from, I would say, more of a you did a lot of agencies, you saw probably how hard the sales piece could be. But I think sometimes the corporate recruiters are like, oh, agency recruiters or whatever, I can be way better than them, all that stuff. I'm like, you're gonna end up respecting their game, because it's a lot tougher than you think, to make that jump. So I think just people being intentional, and I think just one thing that comes across, like, it's just humility. Like, you seem like very like humble about all this. Okay, I don't know what I don't know. I do know what I do know. How do I fill in the gaps? How to play the long game. And kind of just sounds like that's kind of maybe one of the most important things to have, especially if you go off on your own.
Yes, knowing what you don't know. Like, I know I'm a good recruiter. I've been recruiting for years. That is an easy skill set of mine. I have invested literally no learning into my recruitment delivery because I know I've already got it. Sales, no idea. Literally no idea. So yeah, I've invested a lot into learning how to sell, 100%.
And so you mentioned being able to kind of have your own schedule and everything else. Like, how does I would say like the dream, but like how... I know what I'm trying to ask. I'm trying to find the words, but like, what has it done? Almost like shift what your kind of career, family aspirations are. Like, now a year later, all this has happened. Like, has it finally shifted like to what your, what the goals are as a family and opportunities? And like, now you're kind of on the other side, where a year ago, maybe a year and a half ago, it's like, you couldn't even imagine this, or maybe you did. But like, now that it's a reality, like, how does that shift your life?
No part of me thought I would close $700K in my first year. Like, I would be shocked if you sat me down a year ago and told me this would happen. How has it shifted? So my husband and I have always lived far below our means. Like, that's always been a really big focus. That's why we had the runway to start the business, not knowing how it would pan out financially. So that's still what we do. Like you mentioned, we have 4 boys. College is not cheap. Food is not cheap. Like, right? Like, everything. Right. So we never want to be in a place where we're having to make decisions out of desperation. So even in like crazy years of financial blessing that we didn't anticipate, we still try to live in that same way and with that same mentality. But yes, it has definitely changed the things that we can dream about. So one thing that we've talked a lot about, we're foster parents. A lot of our really good friends are foster and adoptive parents. We would love someday to open up a retreat center for foster adoptive parents. Right. And before, with both of us making like regular salaries, that was like, oh, that'd be nice. Too bad it will never happen. Now that I have a lot more control over my income, at least as far as anyone does as an agency owner, that's become more of a conversation for my family and I. So stuff like that, I'm so grateful. But I always have to kind of tether that to the reality that I believe that money's a gift, but I also believe, like I said, that whether clients come or go, that's a gift as well. So work I've done this year is really staying rooted in who I am and what I value, no matter how much money I'm putting up on the board or not.
I love that. I think I know where a few of those principles come from.
You do know where a few of those principles come from?
Yeah. No, it's I love that. And I think it's something that I've had to keep in check, because there's stuff this year that, 5 years ago, I was working $12 an hour, remodeling work. I just moved to Columbus, Ohio. I had no idea how to read. I was useless. The only thing I could do was climb a ladder, and I was barely good at that. And so it's come a long way from that. And it is. It's like sometimes I'm like, this and that, and things are a lot more expensive than they were 5 years ago. But I still kind of have to remind myself, like, this is problems I prayed about 4 years ago, 5 years ago, and all that quote unquote problems, right? And a lot, I had even met my wife there. Obviously, we didn't have our son or anything else, so it's like it is. And I think finding that balance, is that just kind of come from your faith? Is that find a reminder family gives you every single day, or like where does that like come from, of that like awareness to kind of keep balance, like keep on that and kind of just keep going? Because I see people lose their mind a little bit sometimes when they make money and all that. Like, where does that come from?
And it's so tough. Like, please don't hear me say that I just like stumbled upon this mindset. I have had to aggressively pursue this mindset. Like when the money comes, you start to think like, oh my gosh, like it's transformative in a good way, but it can easily become, to use like the language of my faith, like it can become an idol and something that I prize over my faith and my family and all the things that got me to this point and all the things that I know actually are what matters. So I've really had to check my heart and just say, hey, remember, like you're doing this in service. Like my goal is to serve my clients, to serve my candidates, to provide for my family. Like that is my overarching goal and my overarching vision. So yes, my faith is a huge aspect of what keeps me grounded. My family, like the fact that I work from home and they're downstairs with my nanny right now so I can hear them. Like I'm always aware that they are my why. They're why I'm doing this. So that's definitely very grounding for me.
I love that. It's just refreshing to hear. You just don't. There's a lot of hoopla, a lot of noise. I've seen a lot of negativity. I know it's like an overused but very true line out there. So it's just nice to let people. You can use the systems. You can make the revenue. You can have good client relationships. You can have a family. You can deal with all that, and like still like you can make it all happen. And it's never been more attainable than it is right now. And I think it sounds like there is obviously a lot of noise. We've got the election coming up, stuff like that. So, but it's just nice to know, I think the people like yourself that are staying focused, like focus on what's around you, the family, the clients, all that, like what can you control? And to your point, like the things you can't control, it is what it is, right? A little bit. And I think if more people focused on that was one of the biggest lessons for me. Focus on what I can control, and things start to take care of themselves a little bit more. And little by little, it's not all overnight, but then it builds. You look back like, oh, all right. And it's amazing how much noise you can get rid of, and how much noise you actually really don't need in your life and stuff like that. So, kudos to
along
you.
Those lines, I think LinkedIn is useful to an extent, but I think it can also be a massive distraction. So a discipline I've really worked on for myself is not scrolling LinkedIn. Like I specifically go to LinkedIn to post, to DM, to look at who viewed my profile, to look at who liked my content. And then I do spend some time dedicated, like pulling people in my ICP and then going and commenting strategically on their stuff. I don't scroll. I do that in Sales Navigator. So that is one thing. I think a lot of people, that noise comes from LinkedIn. Where you're looking at everyone's success stories, or you're looking at yet another layoff post, whether it's positive or negative. I think that can so easily become a burden, and we're not meant to carry that heavy of a burden of like 10,000 random strangers and what did or did not happen in their careers today. Like that is not for you to carry. Do not get distracted by that.
It's a great point, and I like that you said scroll the Sales Navigator. The strategic commenting is great, and you can even see in Sales Navigator, right, who viewed or who posted recently and all that. Like, I mean, that stuff is great, but I'm with you. I either schedule posts or I post and I walk away. Sometimes it's embarrassing. I'm probably a post sitting there where I haven't replied to comments or whatever. Sometimes even replying to messages, with other things that going on, it's just like you have to have, definitely some controls and some boundaries off of that. So, I'll ask, like, if people are listening, because we do have a bunch of listeners that are thinking of starting their own agency, or maybe they're producers, or they're corporate, or they're even outside of recruiting wanting to get in, like what's some advice that you would give if they're looking to start on their own?
Number one, do it. Literally just do it. I don't know why people, I get it. There's risk, but there's way less risk than if you're a W-2 employee. All it takes for you to lose your entire income is one layoff.
Yeah.
Versus if you own your own agency, if one client falls off, you have other clients, or you have the outbound muscle to go get more clients. So number one, financial stability is I know it sounds counter, but it actually is more present if you're an agency owner. Number two, like I said, for me, the flexibility is huge. Like no one looking over my shoulder, no one telling me what to do or how to do it, no one like counting my PTO days. Like I don't know if anyone else here has been in an environment like that, but I've worked for bosses that literally counted up the days of PTO that I was taking. And I'm like, but is my work getting done? Am I a top performer?
Yeah.
Like, why is this even a conversation?
Yeah.
So if you work for yourself, you can be your own best boss. So I just think it's a win-win, honestly.
That's amazing. And you got, I mean, if I remember, it was laid off in the middle of maternity leave and then started your own business.
I was laid off with a 5-week-old. He was 5 weeks old.
High degree difficulty. So it's like if Julia can make it happen, like it's like with those circumstances, everything else. Like again, I mean that is kudos to you, and there's a lot of inspiration to be taken from that. And then just like the general super positive attitude, I could tell from it from LinkedIn and from the inbox, right? Like high energy and a great attitude. I think a lot of recruiters and going in, that's like kind of the hidden secret a lot of times too with sales and clients. It's just having appreciation of like we're here and what we have and everything. People want to work with people they like. It's obviously a great recruiter, but there could be a lot of great recruiters. There's not a lot of great recruiters that also have an amazing attitude. And I think sometimes like that alone, I've seen people win just with that. So
it's so true. It's so true. Your attitude and your mindset are game changers.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, cool. Well, I know we have to wrap up, but I can't thank you enough for coming on here and being here. It was just so nice to have you on to share your story, to finally meet, because we hadn't actually met before. And congrats on all your success. I'm looking forward to continuing to follow the journey.
Thank you, Clark. I so appreciate that. It was great to be here.
Okay, awesome. Well, until next time, we'll see you guys and happy hunting.